The saddest birthday of my life in Wallis and Futuna, Pacific Ocean, July 2008. From my book, Ciro Discepolo's blog, Volume 1. Important foreword. The trip and stay were very sad, I'd say. Not only for the 100 reasons you'll read here, but also because my love affair with Daniela had begun just over a month ago, and having to leave her for over 10 days was truly excruciatingly painful. Friday, July 11th, 2008, I'm still with you. Even though I'm incredibly tired, I'm 3/4 of the way through my outward journey, and tomorrow, the day after for you, if all goes well, I'll arrive at my destination. Someone asked me to publish the chart for Wallis. I'm rather reluctant because I don't like to be seen, and also because I'm superstitious. However, I'll make an exception. The internet connections are terrible. As I said in Sant'Agata, this year I'm getting cold everywhere. In Algiers, in Moscow, twice, let's not even talk about it. In Scotland, in the Azores, in Istanbul, in Finland. On this trip, I got a real cold treat at the Paris airport, then on the Paris-Tokyo flight, then at the Tokyo airport, then on the Tokyo-Numia, New Caledonia flight, then here in Numia, where the climate is similar to Zurich in January, long live Italy, which, despite everything, is still the most beautiful country in the world. Friday, July 11, 2008, always out of a sense of duty. Many criticize me for the excessive caution I take in organizing and executing every birthday trip, leaving, for example, many days before the actual date. In my life, I've seen many people cry, literally, because they didn't follow my advice and were late to their birthday party, ruining a trip and often experiencing serious problems as a result. I think I can say with complete confidence that in my case, it's not anxiety or ghosts, two realities I'm not familiar with, but rather the devil working 24/7, especially for those, like this writer, with Mars in the third house aspect in their entire chart. Listen to this, fresh from the day. Introduction. Last October, I purchased the entire package for Wallis online from a large travel agency, managing to get a price less than half what the agencies offered me. I received the tickets by email, and I'm relieved for the moment. In planning the trip to Wallis, truly I believe the longest in the world, from Italy, I'm allowing myself ample margins of tolerance regarding the dates, and once again, the facts will prove me right. 2 weeks ago, the company that sold me the tickets in October contacted me and told me that my Noumea Wallis flight on July 14th had been cancelled, offering me 2 alternatives. A flight on the 12th or one on the 16th, arriving a few hours before my birthday. I protested vigorously because I don't believe you can cancel a flight and rebook the passenger by offering alternatives days later. Then, from investigations I conducted here, I learned that the flight wasn't cancelled at all, but the reason for cancelling my seat on that flight was suggested by Elisabetta a few days ago, when she reminded me that both here and in Wallis, July 14th, is a national holiday for Bastille Day. These old foxes at Air Calais, in contempt of all international law, cancelled my airline seat, purchased and paid for many months in advance, presumably to give it to some French government official on an official family trip to celebrate the national holiday. And so far we're still in business as usual, which only makes us wonder what the difference is between citizen violence and the violence of a multinational or the state. See the great Stanley Kubrick in A Clockwork Orange. However, the matter doesn't end there. Naturally, I had protected myself and had been in Noumea since July 9th, waiting for the flight on the 14th. and therefore I had opted for the July 12th date, which will be here tomorrow. I had also saved myself a large safety margin with the previous and subsequent flights, otherwise the entire trip would have gone to waste. So we arrive today, July 11th, here in Noumea. I went online to the Aircalin website to try online check-in, but they don't even know what it is. This worries me a little because the airport is one of the furthest from the city center. Suffice it to say that a taxi from the city center to the airport costs between 90 and 100 euros. We're talking about an hour's drive on an empty highway. The plane leaves at 8 a.m., and you need to be at the airport at 6:00 a.m., but it's better to be there earlier in case there are any complications. This means leaving by taxi at 5:01 a.m. and getting up at 4:00 a.m. To save a couple of hours, I think I could perhaps go to Air France headquarters to get a check-in, since there are only a few hours left until departure. Once again, my excessive caution saved me. I go to Air France, where a very kind French lady listens to me, looks at my documents and says, "This is a flight confirmation. We need a paper ticket because your name isn't even in our computer." I don't want to stand here and celebrate myself, but many people in similar circumstances panic and even commit mass murder. Luckily, I'm naturally very calm and have an enviable composure. I try to understand better. The lady tells me that the Air France paper tickets are missing. Excuse me, what does Air France have to do with this? From the initials you're showing me, I can tell the booking confirmation was made by Air France. You obviously purchased from an intermediary who, in turn, purchased from Air France, but the paper ticket is still missing. So, very calmly, I try to make her understand that I'm the injured party because they cancelled my flight and didn't cancel the flight. But it's a dialogue of the deaf and the mute. Finally, I understand how to unravel the mess. I stop reminding my interlocutor that I was scammed by them, by Air France and by the intermediary company, and I utter the magic phrase, "Okay, I lost the tickets. What do we do?" The woman's face lights up. She tells me to go to the Air France office in Noumea to report my negligence, and in the meantime she warns her French colleague to be lenient with me, to record everything, to find a solution, and to impose a light fine. So I go to Air France headquarters to talk to Melissa, who's truly beautiful but still the opposite party. I try to repeat the same conversation and see her face darken. So I go back to the lost tickets version, and the bureaucratic machine kicks into gear. After about an hour, I sign a document accusing myself of not having Mars in Virgo, and for a mere 90 euros, they give me a paper ticket that says e-ticket, sick. Actually, at Air France, there was also a large, dark-skinned man with many tattoos who looked at me with dislike. For a few minutes, I thought I'd have to pay for my negligence in kind. I return to Air France, and the lady from before confirms that everything is fine. And check-in? No, you'll do that tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. at the airport. If I were to place bets with bookmakers, I could make a lot of money. For example, the day before yesterday, when I arrived in Noumea on the flight from Tokyo, they stopped only one passenger. Guess who? Of course. And for what reason? I don't know, but the customs officials repeatedly asked me if I was carrying live or dead animals in my suitcase. I confess that I had to hold my terrible tongue, because I wanted to make them cry over the terrible things I had to say, but I held back because I have to get to Wallis. If I manage to do so, I hope they'll stop me again on the return flight. If that happens, maybe I'll end up on the news, as I have in the past. It's late Friday afternoon here. Greetings to everyone. P.S. Meanwhile, the weather has changed. Yesterday it rained and blew a cold wind. I never saw the sun, not even for 5 minutes. But today it's hot, muggy, and extremely humid. If I write a report on this trip, I'll give you more details that might be useful. But in the meantime, pray to Our Lady that you never have to go to Wallis. Elizabeth's sad lapse of premonition rolls over the closing credits. Saturday, July the 12th, 2008. If the Bounty Mutineers. I'm in Wallis, and to be precise, this is the photo I just took from my window. The landscape is indeed enchanting, but there's a storm of rain and wind blowing. If the Bounty Mutineers had been through it when they passed through here, they would have reached London in a couple of days. As I predicted, I'm having major difficulties connecting, and I don't know how or when I'll manage. Be patient. Aside from the view, you might even die. See you soon. Saturday, July the 12th, 2008. In the storm, consider these notes of those who have been here for the benefit of those who will come here. When I take challenging trips, I practice long fasts for therapeutic purposes. But last night, I promised someone I care deeply about that I'd eat something. However, it was around 5:30 p.m. and a storm was raging. I was exhausted and lay down on the bed to rest a bit, but instead I slept for 12 hours. The storm is incredibly strong, and it's a very interesting experience that in itself was perhaps worth the trip. I remain convinced that every journey, however mind-blowing it may be, is still a beautiful life experience. Let's get back to the storm. It's exactly the same as the one seen in so many Pacific adventure films of centuries past. The only difference is that you're not in a wooden shell, but inside a small brick house. Otherwise, there are no differences. The roar of the wind mixes with the thunder, and the ominous sound of the trees bending even horizontally. The spectacle is captivating, the sense of isolation almost total. The room is small and dignified with a cold water shower. A small television serves as a decorative ornament because it doesn't receive any stations, but I use it as a lamp to illuminate my laptop keyboard on a tiny table. A large black cockroach ran across the room, but that was to be expected, and I even found one in the shower in Noumea. Dear Elisabetta, I've traveled a few times myself, and I know about those forms I fill out often, but mine was an astrological reminder that with Mars in the 3rd house, I win every lotteries when it comes to choosing just one traveler to check, even with a colonoscopy. I like the image of a caress evoked by the name of the place in question. Other things I liked less, like the widespread poverty and crime, the lack of hygiene almost everywhere, the fact that they forgot to wake me up at the hotel, and that the taxi driver I booked didn't show up. A certain political situation, reminiscent of pre-independence Algeria, and other things. Getting back to this, the owner is also from Algeria and is an elderly Frenchman, the son of a Neapolitan. There are some kind girls in the hotel, locals who speak a language I don't know. One of them understands about 10 English words, but that's enough to understand everything we Westerners lack here. However, the lack of a good non-alcoholic beer doesn't scare me, since I can fast for several days straight without suffering. It's still dark now, and it won't be light until around 7 or 7:30. One person I sent here, among many, told me the storm lasted a week. Another immediately got back on the plane and left. I will stay Sunday, July 13th, 2008. The journey continues. I thank everyone again for the kind words of encouragement to stay in the fortress of the Count of Monte Cristo and Abbot Faria. Fortunately, I possess great inner peace and could even endure prison. What is that? I use trials to strengthen myself, but I will never say, "Oh, Saturn, you make us grow." By the way, for the ladies and gays on the blog, I'd like to point out that there are about 10 handsome young men here in the hotel. As Pasquale Capone would say, hurry if you want to catch one. From their physique and age, I'd say they're either soldiers or athletes. In fact, leaving the hotel, I saw 2 gendarmerie jeeps parked there. P.S. The downpour and the storm continue here, uninterrupted. Sunday, July 13th, 2008. Let's talk about food. First, though, a little news. 3rd day of captivity. As you can see, the storm has subsided a bit, but the outcome isn't much different. Instead, take a look at this place just a few kilometers from Sant'Agata, www.relaysblue.com. If UNESCO has declared the Sorrento Amalfi Coast one of the 7 places in the world that absolutely must be saved, I think there must be a reason. A few kilometers from that paradise lies a hidden beach, where the water is as clean as Sardinia. Can you tell me where the charm of Oceania or Polynesia lies? Anyway, everyone has their own tastes. The investigating judge hasn't questioned me yet. Here, you're surrounded on all 4 sides by dense jungle, and even if you wanted to escape, where would you go? There's not even a bar. Let's get to a few notes on the food. A tip for anyone visiting these parts. The menu says fish, just one type, like in the movie My Cousin Vinny, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Ask for it grilled and without any seasoning, with boiled rice on the side. It's truly delicious and can't hurt. For dinner, you could have an ice cream made outside of the area, and therefore with reliable water. Monday, July 14th, 2008, it started pouring again. The island, completely under siege, observed a truce for a couple of hours. Then it started pouring again, making the biblical deluge seem like a sneeze. They're building at a frenetic pace a Noah's Ark much larger than the original. I'm trying to put together a little dossier on internet connections. If I manage, I'll post it as soon as possible. It's 5:55 in the morning here, and everything's going badly. But 1,000 times better than if I were under the skies at home. P.S. Among other things, I really miss Aunt Teresa. Tuesday, July 15th, 2008. A few thoughts on internet connections. As promised, and in full harmony with the arguments of active astrology, I share with you some personal considerations on the global situation of internet connections. First, I must say that in my opinion, we consumers are about to make a mistake similar to the one we made many years ago when we chose against nuclear energy. Back then it was pure naivety, intoxicated by liberal and green slogans, for which we are now paying dearly. Perhaps we are about to make a similar mistake with the internet. There is much discussion about monopolies and conflicts of interest, and many, without fully understanding what they are, blame conflicts of interests. Let's immediately give a pertinent example. Suppose the billionaire Murdoch or Berlusconi, or Scrooge McDuck, or the banking cartel in association with the Red Cooperatives, wanted to secure the worldwide exclusive rights to all the wireless locations in the world where one could connect to the internet. There would be a huge uproar, and I'm sure consumers would rise up with guns in hand to prevent it. But would it be sensible, and would it really be against the interests of consumers, if a mastermind managed to seize a monopoly on global internet connections? Let's see, and above all, try to understand the situation from the consumer's perspective. What is the current situation? In accordance with democracy and against monopolistic concentration of control over internet transmissions, to the delight of those who consider themselves liberal around the world, at every airport, just to keep to this simple point, users turn on their laptops and, when searching for local Wi-Fi, have the option of choosing between multiple providers, for example, TIM, Vodafone, Munich Airport, etc. Great, everyone will say long live plurality and down with monopolies. But now let's look at the details. Prices vary from airport to airport and from provider to provider. Now, let's leave aside the fact that given the hefty airport taxes paid by each passenger, it would be more than legitimate to expect internet services within airports to be included in the price, like use of restrooms or lighting in waiting rooms. And let's pretend that this hefty additional tax is legitimate. Referring only to this last trip I took, I verified the following. At Naples Airport, I connected to the internet using my cell phone modem and the 2260 contract with TIM. When I arrived at Charles de Gaulle Airport, this subscription was no longer valid, and I was able to enjoy the value of market plurality by choosing from several providers whose names varied more than the substance of the robbery. About €15 for 3 hours of connection. Payment online by credit card. Note: if you're surfing and turn off your computer for a break, when you turn it back on, you'll lose anywhere from a short to a long time, depending on a series of variables. To reconnect, if there were only one provider in the world, this problem wouldn't exist because your password would be unique, your laptop would be recognized immediately and everywhere, and the predetermined fee certainly wouldn't be the highest in the world. Otherwise, in markets much poorer than ours, like India or China, no one would connect anymore. Let's get back to my trip. After a very long flight, I arrive in Tokyo, and there too, I try to connect to my email immediately. Other providers, other prices, other passwords. Here you pay, if I remember correctly, $5 for 5 hours of browsing. As you can see, there are huge disparities from country to country and from airport to airport. We could go on, but I think you get the idea. Are you really sure that from the user's perspective, the plurality of offering is an advantage? For example, in Singapore's wonderful airport, you'll find internet stations every 50 meters, with many computers that can be accessed like sinks. No lines, free, high speed. In Italy, most hotels charge exorbitant prices for wireless internet access when this technology even exists. In other countries that are far ahead of us, like Spain, for example, you can find free internet in all hotels, and you don't even have to ask for a password. To my surprise, even in New Caledonia, Numia, and here in Wallis, I found free wireless in hotels, proving that the French, especially when it comes to technology, are way ahead of us. But let's get to the sore point, bandwidth. This has remained almost the same in recent years, but the number of users has increased at least 100-fold. Let's use a paradox. Let's say Tokyo Airport offers a bandwidth of 50 by V. Let's say ADSL isn't stellar, but it's decent. Now, if there were just one user, they'd gobble up all 54 Mbits per second. But if there were 100 simultaneous users, they'd divide it into 100 parts. And if there were 1,000, they'd divide it into 1,000 parts. What's the result? The result is that if you want to download or upload, you can forget about it. But if that were all there was to it, there'd be no need to cry. The truly dramatic thing is that the bandwidth for each individual user who pays handsomely is so limited that while you're typing a letter, you don't notice that every 3 or 4 keys pressed, the cursor disappears and you think you're writing, but you're just wasting your time. In other words, you manage to write in those tiny intervals where many other users have stopped for a few seconds, perhaps to think. It's truly a stressful situation, and if you want to write a piece like I'm doing right now, you have 2 options. Write 2 or 3 letters at a time with long pauses in between, or disconnect from your wireless network, even disconnect the wireless hardware on your computer, quickly write the letter, save it in Word, and then start the long process of reconfiguring everything and reconnecting to the network. A real disaster. A turning point is upon us, with the imminent possibility of making in-flight phone calls, and therefore also connecting to the internet. Here, there will be a merciless war between the cartels, complete with guarantors who will pretend to be guarantors and will always side with the cartels and never with consumers. The final dramatic question might be, why pretend to provide internet to everyone if in practice you provide it to no one? Tuesday, July 15th, 2008, 5th day of uninterrupted storm. Someone wrote to me asking if it's really that hard here in Wallis. In fact, it's much worse than I described, but I don't want to depress you, and besides, I'm not here for fun, and I'm old enough and well injured to endure situations like this. Meanwhile, tonight, for me, my publisher wanted to give me the complete book cover, which you can see better here. TP Ciro Discepolo .homeweep.net images rivoluzioni JPGG. Thank you to everyone who wished me a happy birthday, privately and publicly. My birthday is in a few hours, 5:27 p.m. for you tomorrow, and 3:27 a.m. next night for me in Wallis. Good evening, everyone. We'll send the bad ones here to Wallis. Thank you, everyone. It's good to celebrate a birthday, and for that reason, yesterday I asked for a cake. And this morning at 7, I also invited 2 French legionnaires and some kitchen girls to blow out the candles with me. The cake is visible and the photo quality isn't the best, because I used my cell phone. So in the series of useful and not so useful news, I'll share some additional information that may be helpful to those who come here, but please understand the irony in my story. Symbols are very important, and it's good to celebrate a birthday when it happens. Like almost all of us, I think I often use a mental alarm, and I intended to wake up at 3:27 to experience the moment of my birthday. At 3:20 I woke up in a terrifying nightmare. I think it was due to the shark I eat grilled every day. I waited until 3:27, checking my notebook for the messages I received at that moment, and I felt it was a good omen not to have started my year in a nightmare. It goes without saying that this terrible and extremely close Mars-Saturn conjunction in the 3rd house worries me greatly, especially for the family members it refers to, but the symbol, I repeat, seemed a good omen. Last night, the 5th uninterrupted day of stormy weather, the hotel owner, an elderly Frenchman with blatantly Scorpio-like features, though fearing it wouldn't show, he even added a caption, a tattoo of a large black scorpion on the inside of his left forearm, seeing me locked in my cell for days, invited me to take a tour of the island. It was almost 5 o'clock, and at 5:30 it's pitch black here, like December back home. Sometimes it's better to dream, to fantasize, than to see reality. In fact, during these interminable days of captivity, I imagined white beaches with a crystal-clear sea, crowded clubs, bright lights, Polynesian music, and so on. Reality was harsh. I asked, "Where's the town?" "What town?" "There's no town, just small houses or huts, scattered here and there along the dirt road with lots of dogs and a few chickens. There are no bars, there are no lights, no music. The seashore is black and muddy, a bit like Bagnoli when Italcider was there." I wanted to ask him about the suicide rate, but I let it go. I once saw a really nice movie, Noi Alinoi, or something like that, filmed near Bildudalur in Iceland, where I was. This boy, the protagonist, thinking he was living in the worst place in the world, dreamed of Oceania and placed a giant photo of an island on his bed. I think it was Wallis. I think it's part of the human soul to think that Wallis is paradise on earth and Bildudalur is hell. Back at the hotel, I also had to fix the Wi-Fi. Otherwise, I would have been without internet for the last few days. Last night's dinner, the usual ice cream, was incredibly sad. Imagine a small guest house outside Rimini in December, with only one guest inside at 5:30 p.m., and with a deluge of rain outside that had been going on for a week. Imagine this single guest in the main room and only one 20-watt light bulb on. Do you have to imagine anything else? Today is the 6th day of uninterrupted storms, but I don't pay attention to it anymore because I have no expectations. These days I've only seen the sun for half an hour, and I took advantage of it immediately, hoping to get some of the tan I've almost completely lost since leaving Italy. A few days ago I was also joined by the French version of Fantozzi, who disembarked on the same plane as me with his wife, 15-year-old daughter, beautiful Notsita, and baby in tow. On the plane he was euphoric and pushed to be the first to get off. The landing was scary, but only on the ground did I realize it was due to the wind. I think Fantozzi won a lottery in his hometown and went home to tell his family, "A week in Oceania, all expenses paid." I think they invited the whole neighborhood to dinner, spending their life savings. Once here, so his family wouldn't notice the horror of the place, he invited them to follow him to the pool where they stayed all day diving, despite the pouring rain and the wind blowing everything away. He was always laughing and seemed enthusiastic. I haven't seen him for a couple of days. Either they drowned in the pool or they swam back to France. This morning, after the cake, I asked the cook, who is the only one who speaks English, "Can we be sure that the plane will take off the day after tomorrow, despite this weather?" And why shouldn't it? Here, everything only stops when there's a cyclone. Sick. Rumor has it that Air Kalin wants to offer another week's free stay if you can't make it. In that case, you'll hear serious news on the news. In short, I hope you never have to come to Wallis, but I can assure you that if I end up in Wallis for the next 10 years in a row, I won't hold back, and will come to Wallis for 10 years in a row. Finally, I'd like to extend a special thought to Celeste and Adriana, who are going through a somewhat sad time in their lives. Come on, think of Wallis, and life will smile upon you. P.S. The window from which I'm writing to you can be found on Google Earth at these coordinates: 7:60 and west and 13:60 Fortpedia. South. I'm trying to send a photo through panoramia.com, but it's a system designed by a twisted mind. Thursday, July 17th, 2008, The Longest Day. The Longest Day is the title of a magnificent 1962 film that recounts the epic events of the Normandy landings that gave us back our freedom and cost the lives of tens of thousands of young people. Among other things I've never understood, despite referring to various other sources, why the all-powerful U.S. Air Force provided complete support on that occasion. Perhaps we'll dedicate a blog to that. For me, this is the longest day. I arrived in French Guiana on the 12th and had storms on the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and from the way things are going, even on July 19th. 8 days of interminable storm when you miss the things and people closest to you. I'm not convinced that Saturn deprivation shapes souls. The strongest are already shaped, and the weakest can even commit suicide. Still, for scientific purposes and not for sports bar chit-chat, my MRI started out like the book. My internet connection got significantly worse, and I missed some messages I was particularly interested in. Mars and Saturn willing, tomorrow at 3 p.m. local time, I'll leave this savannah, and in just 4 days of non-stop travel I should be back home. It's hard to say what the priorities will be, but it doesn't really matter for those emerging from hell. One more thing. For the most evolved and intelligent people, it wasn't necessary. For others, it was. I once saw a really nice movie, Noi Ali Noi, or something like that, filmed near Bildudalur in Iceland, where I was. This boy, the protagonist, thinking he was living in the worst place in the world, dreamed of Oceania and placed a giant photo of an island on his bed. I think it was Wallis. I think it's part of the human soul to think that Wallis is paradise on earth and Bildudalur is hell. Back at the hotel, I also had to fix the Wi-Fi. Otherwise, I would have been without internet for the last few days. Last night's dinner, the usual ice cream, was incredibly sad. Imagine a small guest house outside Rimini in December with only one guest inside at 5:30 p.m., and with a deluge of rain outside that had been going on for a week. Imagine this single guest in the main room, and only one 20-watt light bulb on. Do you have to imagine anything else? Today is the 6th day of uninterrupted storms, but I don't pay attention to it anymore because I have no expectations. These days I've only seen the sun for half an hour, and I took advantage of it immediately, hoping to get some of the tan I've almost completely lost since leaving Italy. A few days ago I was also joined by the French version of Fantozzi, who disembarked on the same plane as me with his wife, 15-year-old daughter, beautiful, not Sita, and baby in tow. On the plane he was euphoric and pushed to be the first to get off. The landing was scary, but only on the ground did I realize it was due to the wind. I think Fantozzi won a lottery in his hometown and went home to tell his family. A week in Oceania, all expenses paid. I think they invited the whole neighborhood to dinner, spending their life savings. Once here, so his family wouldn't notice the horror of the place, he invited them to follow him to the pool, where they stayed all day diving, despite the pouring rain and the wind blowing everything away. He was always laughing and seemed enthusiastic. I haven't seen him for a couple of days. Either they drowned in the pool, or they swam back to France. This morning, after the cake, I asked the cook, who is the only one who speaks English, "Can we be sure that the plane will take off the day after tomorrow, despite this weather?" And why shouldn't it? Here, everything only stops when there's a cyclone. Sick. Rumor has it that Air Colleen wants to offer another week's free stay if you can't make it. In that case, you'll hear serious news on the news. In short, I hope you never have to come to Wallis, but I can assure you that if I end up in Wallis for the next 10 years in a row, I won't hold back, and will come to Wallis for 10 years in a row. Finally, I'd like to extend a special thought to Celeste and Adriana, who are going through a somewhat sad time in their lives. Come on, think of Wallis, and life will smile upon you. PPS. The window from which I'm writing to you can be found on Google Earth at these coordinates: 36 degrees 10 and 6C, west and 13 degrees 1640 south. I'm trying to send a photo through panoramia.com, but it's a system designed by a twisted mind. Thursday, July 17th, 2008, The Longest Day. The Longest Day is the title of a magnificent 1962 film that recounts the epic events of the Normandy landings that gave us back our freedom and cost the lives of tens of thousands of young people. Among other things, I've never understood, despite referring to various other sources, why the all-powerful U.S. Air Force provided complete support on that occasion. Perhaps we'll dedicate a blog to that. For me, this is the longest day. I arrived in French Guiana on the 12th and had storms on the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and, from the way things are going, even on July 19th. 8 days of interminable storm, when you miss the things and people closest to you. I'm not convinced that Saturn deprivation shapes souls. The strongest are already shaped, and the weakest can even commit suicide. Still, for scientific purposes and not for sports bar chit-chat, my MRI started out like the book. My internet connection got significantly worse, and I missed some messages I was particularly interested in. Mars and Saturn willing, tomorrow, at 3 p.m. local time, I'll leave this savannah, and in just 4 days of non-stop travel, I should be back home. It's hard to say what the priorities will be, but it doesn't really matter for those emerging from hell. One more thing. For the most evolved and intelligent people, it wasn't necessary. For others, it was. With this detailed and, I assure you, sugar-coated account of my imprisonment, I wanted to respond to those people who, feeling offended by my refusals regarding possible mileage discounts, slammed the door in my face with insults about the seasoning. I don't miss them, and I won't accept them if they come knocking on my door again. But I want to emphasize one thing. We don't make pizzas here. And when human destiny is at stake, no one gets any less, starting with me. Targeted birthdays are a wonderful and terrible path at the same time. However, it's not for everyone. Friday, July 18th, 2000 goodbye, maybe. Wallis. Even if you read a different date, it's 5:30 a.m. on Saturday, July 19th. Since yesterday afternoon, the photo is from around 4 p.m. The storm has been raging at a much greater rate than the previous 8 days, and I'm afraid they won't let me leave. As you can see from the photo compared to the first one I posted, you can't see more than 50 meters from my window. So much is the water coming down. I'm not even talking about the wind. At this address, I've posted a short sound file with the music I've been hearing for over a week. It's the sound of the Wallis storm, or HTTP, Ciro Discepolo, Homie Netich Images, Wallis Sounds, MP3. If I manage to leave, I have 4 days of almost uninterrupted travel ahead of me. Saturday, July 19th. 2008, 3 things. 3 things have left me perplexed after this trip. First, Elisabetta's chilling prediction. Let's be clear, I'm not talking about jinx or anything like that. No, if anything, I'd say she's highly perceptive, and through a slip of the tongue that's a synchronicity, she grasped a specific reality that was about to come true. Wherever you are, Elisabetta, happy birthday. So, through a slip of the tongue, which as everyone knows is significant and not trivial, our good and charming colleague had spoken of Wallis as the lands of terror, or something like that. Well, my stay began with a terrifying landing, because at that moment a storm with very strong winds had begun. This was followed by the 8 days of mind-blowing storm I described. 3 hours before my departure, as if by magic, after the night of the most violent rain and wind of my entire stay, as soon as I got into the car that was taking me to the airport, the rain stopped, the wind suddenly died down, and the sun came out like a blaze. The second fact that left me a little perplexed was that at the hotel they made me pay a bill, not a small one at that. While I had the idea that they were giving a cash prize to all the volunteers who resisted more than 2 days on the island without attempting suicide. The third fact that surprised me most was that I didn't see a single Chinese person, neither on the island nor on the flights. This last event seems the most disturbing of all. In addition to this, I'd like to share with you the latest news. Early this morning, I was very worried about the weather conditions and feared the plane wouldn't take off. I did some research online. The Noumea Departures Arrivals Board doesn't exist as far as I know, not even on the website managed by Luigi Galli and I, and found the information that my flight had left Noumea for Wallis at 8:08. Hurrah! I screamed like a child. When I left, I asked to say goodbye to all the girls, waitresses, cooks, receptionists, a waste for a single tourist. They were a bit surprised. When I arrived at the airport, I checked in 3 hours early, so afraid was I of being overbooked. "Can I have a corridor seat?" "No problem. Sorry, we don't have corridor seats." "Okay, can I have a window seat?" "No problem. Sorry, we don't have window seats." "Can I have a seat under the Airbus?" The girl smiled, but she didn't know I was actually going to fly, even hanging on to the plane's wheels. Now I'm writing these few notes in flight to New Caledonia, a little piece of ocean toward home. Perhaps this blog is also read by children, so I'll keep a lid on my language. But I have to say that the fact that every kilometer brings me closer to home gives me constant joy. I think all these joys will eventually exhaust me, and they'll have to carry me out on a stretcher once I reach Naples. I think I'll do as Columbus did when he reached the Americas. No one should ask me for mileage discounts, otherwise I'll become hydrophobic. Have a good day, everyone. P.S. Meanwhile, the new RSM is working great. A 130-kilogram woman on the plane almost broke my carbon fiber Sony Vaio in two. Here in Noumea, I wanted to treat myself to a night at the Le Méridien. They charged me 46 euros for 8 hours of internet connection, and there was no Wi-Fi in the room, so I am writing this on the stool in a designated corner of the hotel